Well, hi there. Very happy Independence Day to all the viewers of Blueprint Explosive Exclusive, and I'm Meghna Deka. Well, what we got you was just AI comedy, but a lot is at stake. As here in India we celebrate our freedom, is there going to be peace in the world is the question. After all, as the legendary Dark Knight said, this is what happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object. Who's unstoppable? Who's the immovable object? Well, we'll leave you to decide, and this is the pick that you have. Well, in just hours, you'll have that clash that unfolds in the icy cold stretches of Alaska. After months of back-channel talks, threats, counter-threats, US President Donald Trump is going to be sitting down with Russian President Vladimir Putin. And this is no routine bilateral. The world's economic future hangs in balance on this Alaskan meet which is going to happen. The high-stakes summit could be deciding Ukraine's fate after more than 3 years of war. Trump admits that there's been a 25% chance that peace talks fail, and says that he'll know within minutes of meeting President Putin whether or not he really means to talk and walk the peace talk. But what's at stake? What if this meeting succeeds, and what happens if it fails? Well, here, over the next half hour, we are going to break it down, tell you what it means for Russia, for Ukraine, for America, more importantly for us here in India as well. But before taking his flight for Alaska, President Trump has put out a post on Truth Social's platform, and he has confirmed what to look forward to. Well, he put out a post, and in that he says high stakes with 3 exclamation marks. Well, that is of course Trump's style. He says high stakes. But let's tell you what could be on the line. Well, if the meeting succeeds, war in Ukraine ends after over 3 years. However, if it fails, Russia could intensify the onslaught on Ukraine that we have seen happening. What are the other pros and cons which may just come out of this meeting? If the meeting succeeds, Ukraine could lose the entire Donbas region. If the meeting fails, US imposes additional sanctions on Russia, but also unfortunately against Russia's allies such as India. If it succeeds, it may just pave the way for improved US and Russia talks and ties. And if it fails, big face loser it is going to be from brand Donald Trump, who projects himself as the peacemaker, the global peacemaker of the world. If it succeeds, however, Trump gains credibility as the peacemaker, and that noble pitch that he's been making for himself gets another push. But if it fails, then it is going to divide between the West, and Russia will only deepen from here onwards. So this is what happens if the meeting succeeds, and what if it fails. But before taking flight for Alaska, Trump put out a post on Truth Social's platform, and he confirmed what to look forward to. But Russia and Ukraine, and this is the post that he has put out, high stakes with 3 exclamation marks. This is right before he took off for Alaska. He put that out, final yarn that he's given before the big summit. But Russia and Ukraine, they will be the ones who are going to be directly affected after all from this meeting, positively or negatively, by this summit. But Moscow and Kiev aren't the only players with a lot at stake. Let's tell you what's at stake for other countries. Let's start with India. What's at stake for India? If the meeting is successful, US could reduce the tariffs from 50%, as it has been announced already. If it fails, US has threatened additional tariffs could be even beyond 50%. What does it mean for Russia? If it succeeds, if the meeting is successful, US and EU nations could consider lifting the sanctions on Russia. But if it fails, US has already warned, Trump has already warned that there are going to be serious consequences. He was asked specifically, does it mean tariff? Does it mean sanctions? He said, you'll watch, but it's going to be serious consequences of that. But what does it mean for America? If the meeting is successful, it bolsters Trump's self-made image of a global peacemaker. But if it is unsuccessful, it is going to undermine his credibility both at home, where he's facing a lot of criticism even from the Republican quarters, but also abroad. But what's at stake for Ukraine? And this is an interesting one to watch out for, because after all, as we all know, US and Russia are going to be in talks, but Ukraine is not going to be part of this bilateral. What does it mean if the meeting is successful? Ukraine fears that captured areas could just be given off to Russia by President Trump, is the biggest fear. But if it is unsuccessful, diplomacy fails, the war continues, and that is something that Ukraine definitely does not want. So there are serious fears and concerns that this bilateral meeting without involving Ukraine could be detrimental for Zelensky and his nation. Trump, after all, being the businessman he is and so desperate to get that Nobel Peace Prize, could be selling out, is the fear. He could be selling out Ukraine's strategic interests, territorial interests, in order to keep Putin happy. This is what Russia may seek its pound of flesh for. For the price of peace, for Russia may be seeking to retain Crimea. Second thing it may seek is to seek the eastern Donbas region, which it has already currently occupied and moved its troops into. Russia may also want to end Kiev's NATO ambitions that Kiev has been pushing for. Now, while the talks in itself are considered to be of utmost importance, there's also real interest over the location of the summit. Alaska, of course. But why Alaska? Let's tell you why Alaska was picked. It is a legal shield for Putin. Why, you ask? Because remember, Putin has been indicted for war crimes by the ICC, the International Criminal Court. In 2023, there is a ICC warrant against Putin even as we speak, which is why he may be arrested in 125 countries in which ICC warrant is going to be acceptable. However, US does not recognize ICC jurisdiction, which is why he is not going to be arrested in American soil, on American soil. It's also very strategically and geographically strategic location because, remember, Alaska is merely on the other side of the Bering Strait, and the Bering Strait is merely a 4-kilometer Bering Strait which separates Alaska and US. Also, it is intertwined history which paves the way for diplomacy between US and Russia. We'll explain the history in just a bit. Also, let's talk about the security and seclusion. The summit is going to be at the joint base, which is Elmendorf-Richardson Army Base, which is a joint base of Russia and America. Here, Alaska, this is Alaska's largest and most secure military base, and significantly it is a gun for gun and tank for tank when it comes to Russia and America. But there is the larger history that I was telling you about behind Alaska itself, which has been serving as the location for this meeting. It isn't the only thing that really connects both Russia and US with the icy cold region. Let's also remind you how it is intertwined in their histories as well. Now, remember, in 18th century, Alaska used to be a Russian colony, which is when, in 1867, it was sold off by the then Tsar to US for a mere $7.2 million. Mere $7.2 million. In fact, that was called the Steward's folly. Steward was the man in America who had actually negotiated that deal with Tsar. At the time, it was said that it was the biggest folly for Steward to have actually bought this icy wasteland, which had no value. But that's where the plot thickened and it completely turned. Because it was in 1896 that the Klondike gold rush began in Alaska, where there were tons of gold which was found in its mines. And then in 1957, there was oil which was found at the Swanson River field, which made Alaska even more lucrative than it was ever imagined, really. Then by 1968, there were huge, massive oil reserves which were found in Alaska. This time it was at Prudhoe Bay, which really changed the thing. So was it really the Steward's folly? Not really, in hindsight. In 1959, Alaska officially became a US state, which is why many say that this is the perfect setting for a meeting between Trump and Putin. Because after all, after the Cold War, we'll have to wait and see if there's going to be a thaw in the relationship between the two countries in this icebox of America. But before we go to our guests, let's play out some of the reactions which have been coming in, the war of words from all the parties concerned. Well, let me go across to our panelists. Today, joining us on the show, we have Dr. John Harrison, of the Homeland Security expert. We also are being joined by Neeraj A Sharma. He's an international relations expert. He's going to be telling us about India's point. But Dr. Harrison, I'm going to come to you first. Because as we all know, President Trump has already taken off for Alaska. Now we know what President Trump wants. He says he wants peace. But it's interesting how the voices and the indications coming from him has gone from total peace will be ensured, I will get another Nobel, another war that I'm going to stop. Now he's tempered it down, saying there's a 25% of failure. This is actually going to be a listening exercise, that this may just fail and may just pave way for more talks. What really does America hope to get from President Putin? Because now it turns out that America is finding out he's not as easy peasy as one would have expected.
Well, Meghna, thank you for having me. I wanted to make one little point. I think there was a just accidental misstatement in your intro piece. Joint Base Elmsdorf and Richardson are a joint U.S. Army Air Force base. It sounded like you said it was a joint U.S. Russian base. I'm sure it was just a slip of the tongue. But you're right.
Agreed.
But you're right. The White House has been playing the expectations game a little bit better in the lead up to this. President Trump tends to like to speak in very grandiose terms of what could be accomplished. So I think he's trying to manage that a little bit because it has become clear that whatever President Trump is saying publicly, President Putin has a very different response to that. It seems as if perhaps the recent tariffs that may go into effect on Russian oil has sort of heightened the attentions of President Putin. But I think neither side is really going to get very much out of this meeting because the reality is the main players in this, Russia and Ukraine, one of the two is not at the meeting. So I think saying this is a listening exercise is a way of better managing those expectations, to realize that nothing coming out of this meeting isn't a failure. This is the first step in what may be a very long process. And I think President Trump is realizing that the statements he made during the campaign are going to be much harder to achieve. This is not going to be something that will be accomplished in 24 hours. This is going to be a much longer process. And he is absolutely right that this is a very high-stakes process. Whatever comes out of this meeting may or may not be in and of themselves very high stake, but certainly the process will be.
Neeraj Sharma, that's not going to be good news for India. India, of course, has been watching very closely because the tariff time bomb is ticking. We cannot await a longer process because the 50% tariff is going to come into play.
You are right to a large extent. If we leave the geographical sightseeing of Alaska aside and focus on the exact agenda, President Trump is on board his aircraft to Alaska after the successful seizure of conflict between Congo and Rwanda. And he is on board with that confidence that when he reaches Alaska for the peace summit, he can actually have President Putin look at it with a very different lens. Now, when it comes to India, India has always been supportive of diplomatic discussions when it comes to conflicts. India has never encouraged conflicts. We all know that. But then, yes, if there is a positive outcome and if there is de-escalation, then we are looking at the possible relief of prices of crude dropping as low as $60 a barrel, which will ease inflation and energy costs in India. But on the other side, conversely, if the talks are not conclusive, then it could actually push the barrel up, which is going to cause trouble for us. And we are also seeing that rupee fluctuations are happening on regular basis, and it remains fragile even with the given tariff pressures. Now, if we look at Prime Minister Modi's appeal repeatedly, where he has been saying that this is not an era of war, and he's repeatedly told President Putin that Gio or Gine Do, live and let live. So if we look at all these aspects, I'm sure that wisdom should prevail and there should be an outcome which will not only help Ukraine, but also India and other countries. But indeed, at the moment with the tough tariffs, India is already moving to source oil from alternatives like Brazil and Middle East. But then any war, if it is stopped, is always helpful to the entire globe.
Right. So, which is why this is going to be so very significant, because India has also promised to buy a significant amount of oil from US. So those are the bargaining chips that India does have in its kitty. But Dr. Harrison, I'm going to come back to you. What is the price that America would be okay in paying in terms of territorial integrity? Because that has been one of the most talked about issues. At least Zelensky has said it several times, that they feel the territorial integrity of Ukraine may be something which may be compromised in this two-way bilateral conversation which is happening, because Ukraine clearly has been kept out of it.
Correct. And that's going to be the key to this, whatever settlement, if one ever happens, will be. The Russians are making some military gains recently in the Donetsk region. But the reality is that there may be some language that can get around what would be seen as a territorial concession. For instance, you can go back to the original Minsk agreement, where though Crimea and Donetsk and a few other of the eastern Ukraine has an autonomous relationship with the central government. Or if Russia doesn't want to concede any territory, there would be no legal recognition of the de facto occupation. And that seems to be a point that President Putin is well aware, because he wants, and has been very clear about a number of things he wants from the start of the war, but he wants legal recognition of the occupation. And that's going to, I would find it very hard to
put up with it.
NATO's not going to put up with it. The U.S. Congress isn't going to put up with it. So I don't think that is going to be a concession he's going to be able to get. Whether or not he should be able to get any concessions is obviously a different issue. But the idea that the United States would formally recognize that, that's not, I don't think that's going to get any traction anywhere. So whatever if the president wants that, and it doesn't seem to be any indication that he does, but if he would settle for something like that, and if he could convince, I'm not sure he could convince Ukraine or anybody else to take that.
Definitely not the EU. You're right. You're absolutely right. President Trump's not made any such direct signals that he may be making any territorial concessions. However, that has been one of the biggest fears, which has been red flagged by Zelensky, by EU as well. However, tonight is when we expect. In India time, it is going to be 12:30 a.m. when this Alaskan adventure is going to begin. We'll have to wait and see, however, what really comes out for it, because time may be running out for India. The tariff bomb has been ticking. What does it really mean? Right here on Times Now, we are going to keep you abreast. Appreciate it, Dr. John Harrison, for joining us, as well as Neeraj Sharma. Thank you for your perspective. Without a short break, stay tuned.